today, Paul and myself are going to spend some time looking at what consumers and architects are telling us and digging into the details of the floor plans and the elevations that match that. So grab some snacks, grab a coffee, grab a water, and we're going to get rocking and rolling. So Paul, do you want to introduce yourself before we get going?
Sure, I'm Paul Hansen. I'm the president of franchising and product development for Epcon Communities. So I'll be talking about how we're either already doing or starting to implement some of the trends that Deanna and her team have identified through their architect survey.
Fantastic. And we have lots of good examples for you all, and we are going to jump right into what we're looking at. Oh, look, there's us. We look pretty good, don't we? All right, so we have paired data and design together so that you can start to stay ahead of what is going on in the consumer mindset. As I mentioned, we have 8 things to get through. So the first one is preparing for buyers that expect more. And so when we talk to architects from around the country, what we hear is that they get the same square footage, but consumers are asking them for more and more and more and more to fit into that space. So we can talk about how we do that. One of the ways, the number one way, is home office. The number 2 is fitness space. The number 3 is a flex space. I just want to make it what I want to make it. That's what the consumers are telling us. A back kitchen or a big butler's pantry is number 4. And giving me something that's an accessory dwelling unit or a multi-gen suite, an in-law or nanny suite, some people call it, or some sort of rental space that I can help offset my mortgage. So those are the top 5. And then Paul's got a great example here.
Yeah, all of our homes are designed as ranches, and they are programmed, though, to have the capability of a second floor bonus suite. About a third of our buyers pick that, so that leaves us with 2/3 of our sales. We can get really creative on that space that is designed for the staircase. So here's an example of a back kitchen that we've designed on one of them. That's something that's been very popular in high-end custom for quite a long time. We're more production style, but also consider ourselves to be a luxury builder. And so this is a way for us to incorporate that feature and charge a premium for it as well versus just a very large walk-in pantry instead. So we're putting in a dishwasher, extra sinks, some cabinets, a wine storage cooler, things like that, instead of just the standard wire shelving you typically see in a pantry.
And so what this means is 2 sinks, 2 refrigerators, 2 freezers, sometimes 2 stoves. Do you ever do two stoves?
Ours aren't that large, but I've seen that before.
This is a really nice sized one, actually. What is that? About 10 by 10, it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
So what are they using that back kitchen for? It's just a sink and a dishwasher.
Really, think about when you're entertaining, have a lot of dirty dishes. You wouldn't want to have those in the kitchen area, so put them back there and kind of hide the leftovers from the party, and then they can start the dishwasher back there instead of having it running in the kitchen.
And a lot of times it's if they're having, if you're keeping your square footage of your home at a decent space and size, that kitchen becomes where everybody gathers. And so trying to do some of the work in the background while people are entertaining on the front. So the front kitchen becomes a show kitchen, and the back kitchen is really where the work is being done. And then talking about lock-off suites. So around 15% of production architects tell us that they are including a lock-off suite or multi-gen suite or a rental suite in their units around the country. And so when we talk about that, 15% are designing it now. That means that within the next 1 to 3 years, depending on what part of the country they're working in, is when a lot of these will hit the market. So we're going to see an uptick of these multi-gen suites that are going to start to show up in new homes.
And as I mentioned, about a third of our buyers take this bonus suite option. These are the pictures that you see on the screen. Our homes are very popular with the 55 plus demographic, so a lot of them don't need that second story, but the ones that are maybe younger, have younger grandkids, when they come visit, they love having this space. And even as we're getting into selling to Gen X buyers now, they want the rental opportunities of these spaces. So the way this is designed, the staircase is typically right off the door inside the garage. You could put an extra door there, close that off, and have this be an Airbnb space or some kind of rental space to offset the cost of the mortgage.
This is a really fun space. This is great for the grandkids too.
Yeah, I love how it's just all or nothing. So it comes with a rec room, a bedroom, a bathroom, and then you see in the bottom left there options for a kitchenette or a wet bar. So it truly is like a mini apartment on the second floor.
And then we're expecting more trade-offs in the bathroom. And so what does that mean? And do we do a shower and a bathtub? Do we do a shower bath combo? Do we just do the shower? What are we looking at here? And so more often we're seeing that no bathtub was being included in at least one of the bathrooms in the home.
Given the age of our typical buyers, tubs have never been a big selling point for us, but I have seen in the last few years a big decline in people taking the soaking tub options or even converting the secondary bathroom into a walk-in shower. So right now our most popular options in the primary bathroom is an L-shaped zero entry shower, and then taking away the tub shower in the secondary bathroom and turning that into a walk-in shower as well. So a few years ago, I wouldn't have even been able to imagine somebody building an entire house without one bathtub in it, but that is what we're seeing today because they just want the shower and the look.
They're also a lot easier to clean
That's right.
and get in and out of. And then we're also seeing that open shelving, anything that's exposed, is starting to wane. People aren't including this as frequently. This is throughout the home, but specifically in the kitchen. And the mindset around this as we talk to consumers is really, I have enough chaos and clutter in my day-to-day life. I just want to be able to shut the cabinet and walk away. And if it's a mess back there, that's fine, but the cabinet is keeping me from having to look at it, right?
Yeah, when we talked about this, I told you we did a model home about 2 years ago that had open shelving in the kitchen, and very few people selected it. They just told us, I don't want to have to keep that clean all the time. I'd rather have the cabinet space. And I went to try and find a picture of that model, and I couldn't, so that tells you how well it went. So instead, we've gone back to having some options where we'll have glass doors on cabinets if somebody wants something visible, but they like the ability to close it off, not have to dust it and clean it as much as they would on an open shelf.
Which brings us to point number 2. Do not close off the great room, but do include more private spaces. So I'm going to give the example of some of the luxury homes that I've seen around the country. And I spend a lot of time walking product around the country, looking at what's being built around the country. And sometimes you walk into a home and there's a big open great room. And it's beautiful and massive, and it has a double staircase, and there's all these things that happen in this one space. I'm not saying to close that space off. What we're saying is to look at the details of it. Are there places that you can go that might be slightly more private? Can you shrink that down a little bit and maybe provide some of the other spaces that people are going to focus on reading or they're going to take a call from? And they can be connected to those spaces without necessarily being all in one big open great space. And then back to the conversation around clutter, we're seeing a lot more of these spaces start to pop up adjacent to those great rooms. So what's going on in a drop zone, what's going on in a workshop area. The prep kitchen is another great example of this, where all of the things where the action happens, we're trying to find spaces to organize it, to store it, and to keep it out of sight. And then merchandising is a big one. I don't need to tell you guys this. Merchandising is a huge piece of how we bring that flex space to life. So here's a list of some of the spaces that we consider flex spaces within a home that's not a bedroom or a living room or a kitchen. So home office is number 1. So if you're going to merchandise home office, and you only get to merchandise one space, do your home office. Number 2 is the media and game space, and then a children's play space. Some sort of study or homework space for kids are the top 4 there.
And as you were talking about not closing off the great room, but finding ways that you can put pockets around the house, we always like to look for areas where we can put little flex spaces, though we tend not to label them as flex space on the plans. We like to define what they're going to be. So we have a wine room option. We also have a den option in certain areas. And these don't have to be very large, don't have to have large windows to them. But if you merchandise them well, you can really paint a picture of what they could do for the customer.
I like that I would love to choose between wine room and office. I feel like those two are great juxtaposition.
Well, that wine room was in Texas, and you can tell with the stone on the wall. It's just very Texas to me, overdone.
I'm okay. I'm okay with that. That's what I just
You'll allow
want
it?
to feel like I'm in the old country when I'm drinking my wine. That's a great look. All right, number 3 is to reallocate square footage in outdoor spaces that extend the interior living to the outdoor space. 52% of architectural designers are designing outdoor spaces differently due to what's happened in the past 2 years, and we do not believe that this is going anywhere anytime soon. This is a trend that was trending before the pandemic, and the pandemic just like put it on steroids and accelerated it. So, 10 years ago, you heard about California rooms, right? Now you hear about Texas rooms and Arizona rooms and Colorado rooms, and they're all the same thing. They're covered outdoor living space. But it now, 10 years later, everybody, there's a North Carolina room, there's a Maine room, there's a Florida room. Pick whatever state you're in, and that's the room name. That's started, and now we've just gotten to the next level of making it really functional, and that it flows really well from the inside to the outside of the home. And 65% of the homes are connecting to nature. When we talk about connect to nature, we're talking about that slider that'll take you outdoors. We're also talking about more natural light. We're talking about more windows. We're talking about biophilia and having some plants inside the home. There's multiple different ways to bring nature into the home. And here we go. I beat myself to it. But larger windows and those slider doors are the top 2 ways that architects introduce this in carving out interior space and more access points to outdoor. So if you have one big open place that everything connects versus trying to find 3 or 4 places within the home that people can get to the outside or connect with the outside in some way. And the most important place to get this right is in the kitchen, secondary being the family room, but kitchen is really number 1 here. And if we talk to homeowners, though it's not just architects that are telling us this, it's also homeowners. We said if you were going to do a remodel of your home, where would you prioritize that in an outdoor space? And they said they would create lounging space, they would create a private space so their neighbors cannot see them, hello privacy, and they would prioritize a cooking or dining space. So that's really, what are we talking about here? We're talking about living. We're talking about the living room, the great room, being outdoors and indoors. And as we're seeing the preference of indoor and an outdoor retreat, we said, would you prefer, if we gave you a certain amount of square footage, would you rather use that inside the home for a retreat in your primary suite or outside in an outside space? And the majority of people chose outdoor to have something off of their primary bedroom.
And this is one thing that we've come to be known for in our markets. We really feel like we're good at blurring the line between the interior and the exterior. And to get a sense of how we do it, you first have to understand how we design our plans. So that's why I have a drone shot there at the top right. Instead of putting the outdoor living on the back of the house, as most builders do, our buyers, given their age, typically don't care about a backyard, and we're trying to increase density in our projects. So we'll put that living space on the side. And each of our plans have an active and a passive side. So the passive house on the top side of the courtyard doesn't have any windows on that side of the house. All the windows are on the active side. So we're flooding the house with natural light in areas like the bedrooms, the kitchen, and giving us the ability to provide access to that courtyard from the primary bedroom, from the kitchen, from the den, multiple points. It's all enclosed, very private, nobody can see into it. And the really tall western door slider options have become popular with us in the last couple of years in particular.
This is a really smart design solution. It lets so much good light in. Look at that light. It feels fantastic.
That's perfect representation there at the bottom left, how it just kind of
Yeah.
goes together.
It's really nice. It literally, you blurred the line there for us. It's great.
Now, as a builder or design consultant, another benefit of doing this is just the personalization options that this space allows. So we've gone crazy with the number of options that we allow buyers to choose from to personalize these areas. And it's really good profit and revenue driver for us to do the hardscaping, fountains, pavers, turf grass. All of it's very, very popular with our buyers right now.
What percentage of people do you think would choose to sort of finish it off in this way versus do it after they close? Do you have a...
Especially our buyers, given the fact they don't want to do the work themselves. Many of them are doing quite a few customizations in that area. Right now, our average just in the courtyard is about 15,000 in options per sale.
And is that something that they talk about up front, or is that something that you're talking about as you're closing on the home?
They do it at the design studio, so it's the last step in the design process. We're actually thinking about putting it at the beginning because we're wondering if we can get even higher than 15,000 if people are tapped out by the time they get to the courtyards at the end.
Yeah, we'll be talking more about design studios and design centers. Hi, Dennis, tomorrow afternoon. So we're going to dig into how that works.
Just another example, and you can see once we merchandise it in our model homes, that really makes a key of painting the picture of what it could look like. And one of the latest ones, yet also the simplest ones, is the string lights that we've started doing. That's very popular right now.
It's so popular. The festoon lights, like you have them displayed here, I feel like I see them everywhere, but it's such a good feeling.
Yeah, and it's
like
easy.
to sit underneath those. It's like, I think I bought them recently on Amazon. It was like $50, but it made a huge difference, right?
Then some other areas, we do outdoor kitchens in climates where it makes sense, and mentioned that the owner's suite can access the courtyard, and so you see a screen porch option there. That's another good way that we take some additional privacy into the courtyard, allows them to keep the doors into the bedroom open in warmer months of the year.
Number 4 we would like to talk about is modernizing exteriors to combat rising cost pressure. And so we have talked to consumers. They've told us that this is a totally acceptable way for them to save money, that they want to make sure that they get what they're looking for. And what the home looks like on the exterior doesn't really matter for about 65% of the consumers. When we ask architects what are the most popular elevations that they're designing right now, contemporary is number 1, and things continue to get, if you look on that transitional scale with like extreme modernism here and traditional on this side, we are slowly starting to move this way as time goes on and cleaning up the elevations, removing some of that ornament. That's where the modern farmhouse comes into play. When we look at farmhouse, we're really talking about a modern farmhouse here. Craftsman is very popular, and then mid-century, which is also a modern style, are the top ones by far that our architects are telling us are most popular. And here's the, 64% saying, I'm flexible on my exterior as long as it's for the home that I really like. So that floor plan comes first in their mindset, and then they're starting to think about the exterior. Is it acceptable? Is it not? And we continue to see on exteriors of homes a material mixing that's happening. It's not just all brick. It's not just all siding. It's not just all stucco anymore. We're seeing them start to mix and match. Not only is it visually appealing, but it also helps to bring visual interest, but value engineering too, right? So you're like, okay, I don't want to do the whole front in some sort of masonry. That's very expensive. But I want to pick this one spot, and I want to do it really well there. And they choose where to spend the money to make those options.
So as recently as a year ago, we had 4 different architectural styles that we were building our elevations upon. We're now going to focus on 2, which happen to be 2 of the top 3 in Deanna's data, so Craftsman and Farmhouse. And if you go to the next slide, I think we can get even better in the farmhouse that we're doing. What we're doing today is pretty basic, just board and batten, one color. I want to go to where we're maybe doing some accent dormers that are different colors, mixing some materials as well. Not adding a lot of cost, but really going more modern farmhouse than just farmhouse.
Well, and we've been spending a lot of time talking about how to, okay, something's already gone through. It's already been approved. You've already got it entitled. You've already gotten everything approved in the city, right? Well, now that the winds have changed, and maybe you have some homes that are in the process of being built right now, and you need to find somewhere to save. Color blocking versus a material change is a great way to save a little bit of money somewhere, and it's not necessarily something that the consumer is going to pick up on, and it's not going to be like, oh, well, it doesn't have brick, I'm deal breaker. Like, no, they're in love with the floor plan. They're in love with the neighborhood. That decision's not really going to make them just like turn a switch off. Number 5 is cutting cost has increased for architectural designers. And how are they doing this? So let's dig into it if we can. I'm stuck. Oh, there we go. I think it's a little bit delayed. So when we ask them, production architects specifically, so I'm not talking about custom architects, I'm talking about architects that work with production builders. They say value and cost is where they're focusing over the next 3 years, followed by connection to nature and energy efficiency. And how are they doing this? They're doing it through reducing square footage or simplifying footprints. One architect was like, every time I turn a corner, I get my hand smacked. And I'm like, well, that's because they're expensive. Corners are expensive, right? And so we see that those are really the top two. But if you look at the next 3 down, they're all about evenly weighted from architects that work on production homes from around the country. And that's simplifying the roof form, adjusting the exterior materials, and then adjusting the interior materials and finishes. Those are all equally weighted. So once you've gotten your square footage reduced, or maybe you decide that's not for you, you've simplified your footprint. That's really the next tier down where people are starting to look to adjust those costs. And the functional upgrades are better than aesthetic ones. And so I want to talk through this. So we're talking to consumers, and they say, yeah, it's great to have, I don't know, name a really fancy anything, like finishes wise, where it looks good, but it's not increasing function. Would I rather have a really high quality slab, or would I rather have 10 more cabinets? They're probably going to pick 10 more cabinets in order to have that storage, in order to do that. So when you're trying to make a decision between what you're going to offer to the consumer or what you're going to choose to merchandise or put in your model homes, function, so many functions. And sometimes it's finding the cost-effective way to still get through it. So the example here is the zero post corner sliders. They look great. They're fantastic. But having that post there sometimes isn't a deal breaker for the consumer. And then 2-story volume can be very expensive, but not necessarily that important to the consumer. So might be another place where you could add another bedroom to increase the value of the home there and fill in that space, or you can just forego it altogether.
So about a year ago, we, maybe a little late to the game, but started to get worried about the increases in sales prices that we had seen on our traditional floor plans, and decided to go down the path of a more attainable lineup to sell alongside our traditional lineup. So at the bottom right, you can see our typical roof structure, pretty complicated. And now the new style that we're going towards, at least as a supplement to what we're already selling, much simpler. And we'll see some slides in a little bit on the floor plans. You'll see it has the same room count, some of the same features that our typical homes do, but a lot more efficient to build, fewer corners, simpler roof.
And do your consumers, are they like, no, I really, that roof's just not doing it
No,
for me?
they've never seen it from the top, so they don't know.
Yeah.
Another example would be the window schedule. Traditional lineup, lots of different windows, very hard, especially in supply chain crisis times like we're in right now. On the left, the new lineup. And I want to get even better on that. I want to go away from mold windows as we're refining the plans over time. Just as I've talked to our suppliers, you know, if we can get them down to 5 or 6 window types, they'll stock them for us. We won't have these lead time issues that we're having right now. They could never possibly stock the window schedule on the right and keep us moving.
Can you talk a little bit about the process that it took for you to get from your traditional line to your attainable? Was there like everybody in the same room and let's start cutting corners, or was there a design review process? Like, how did you do that? Because that's amazing. That's a pretty significant reduction.
Well, in this instance, we started with a blank sheet of paper to come up with a couple of new plans. We had some design criteria to it, but we could do the same thing with the traditional line, and we're planning to in the next year, to really sit down in a room, okay, where can we take away a corner without compromising on design or function? And where can we eliminate some windows that we don't really need to be different size throughout the house?
I'm impressed. That's pretty cool.
So here's an example of one of those. We have 2 that are fully developed now. They start as 1-car garages. The task to the product development team was to come up with something that has the same attributes as our very popular Legacy collection, but is a lot more efficient to build and comes in a little smaller square footage, because a lot of our buyers are single. They're either widowed or just single, divorced, and they don't need all the space. So 2 bedrooms for them is plenty. Oftentimes they don't even need a den, but we do have the option for that in some pocket areas. And They all have a 2-car garage option for people that want 2-car garages. So the idea was to go from our typical 42-foot width product down to 28 in a 1-car garage or 35 with the 2-car garage option. And it's allowed us to get our base prices down by about $50,000.
50,000.
Then here's the other one, the larger one, the Rockaway. So one is at 1,300 square feet, 1,400 square feet. Just very efficient, but still maintains all the things that we think make us special, the private outdoor courtyards and the 2 bedrooms on the main level for our 55-plus buyer.
So the $50,000, is that really helping you reach new buyers because you're getting to a better price point, or are they then spending that on upgrades, interiors, finishes, something of that nature?
They're still loading them up, but it allows us to tap into a broader pool of buyers because we had seen our prices, when I started with the company about 4 years ago, average prices were about $350,000. We've crept up over $450,000 now on the traditional lineup, and this allows us to get back down in the high threes in our markets.
All right, number 6, neighborhood densities will increase. We've heard it from multiple different sources, and it's going to happen all over the country. It's not in the traditional markets where you think of being dense markets. Whatever you consider to be dense in your current market, it's going to get more dense. And we're seeing that in the production environment, that 62% of architects that work in the production home side are currently designing or working on projects that are in a higher, more dense than they were the previous year. And in order to do this, you can, yes, just create a new product, but you also have to think about 3 things. 1 is privacy, 2 is outdoor space, and 3 is storage. So if your home's gonna get a little bit smaller, you're gonna have to think about the storage and where is everything gonna be stored and how's it gonna be tucked away and how are people not gonna have that visual clutter that they're trying to avoid because they already have so much other chaos in their life. If you're thinking about outdoor space and the lot's getting smaller, it's got to be a little bit more thoughtful. I love the side courtyard. It's a brilliant, brilliant solution. And then privacy. So how do I not necessarily, I'm in my bathroom and my neighbors can see in, or I'm washing dishes and I have to wave at my neighbor. There's a story that we have in one of our podcasts where somebody goes, yeah, I have my window, and then it's in front of my kitchen sink, and my neighbors also has a picture window in front of their kitchen sink. And one night I'm washing the dishes, they're finishing dinner around the same time we are, and I wave to my neighbor and they pull the shade down. And I was like, well, what does that tell you? It tells you that some people are very comfortable waving at their neighbors while washing their sinks, but more likely than not, people don't want people staring into their home while they're washing their dishes or doing whatever else they're doing in their evening routine. So thinking about those things in window adjacencies.
So this is something that we've been really focused on, just also in response to the increased cost. How can we get more density? And one interesting thing that I've heard from our land people is cities are actually starting to ask for this. They recognize the need for it as well. Recent example in our Raleigh operation, City of Durham actually asked us, is there anything that you can do to increase the density on this site? And I can't remember the last time a municipality said that to a builder, but it is happening right now. So the traditional plan collection that we have that we've built for about 15 years now gets about 3 to 3.5 units per acre. And that is, as Deanna said, all relative to the market. Some of the Texas builders in our system can get it up to 6 in some ways. But we've gone back to doing some attached product in the form of 4-unit townhomes. If we were to do an entire community of that would get us to 6 units per acre in most of our markets. And then with the new attainable line that I talked about, if we did an entire project of that with the 2-car garage option, assuming that's going to be the one that sells more, that would be 4.5 units an acre. So we now have 3 different lines in our arsenal we can take in and go to a project and design it as kind of a mixed lot sizes and increase the overall density.
Were they trying to meet some sort of requirement in Raleigh? I'm so curious.
They just wanted some lower price, smaller houses and increased density. So they get it.
All right, Raleigh.
So here's an example of where we've done this. This is also in the Raleigh market. So we have 3 different lot sizes in this community. We have 86 home sites with 52-foot wide lots for our legacy product. 78 where we're doing the attainable product, and then 28 4-unit townhome buildings. So versus in Raleigh, where there's topography issues, obviously, and more stormwater requirements, we were under 3 units an acre typically in our projects there. This one gets us to over 4 units per acre, even on a site that has some topography to it, and this is in the Durham area.
All right, we're on number 7. Prefabrication and modular has jumped from the least likely design driver when we surveyed architects in 2020 to one of the top R&D priorities for them when we surveyed them in 2021. So why is this? Number 1, they're looking at affordable housing solutions. Number 2, prefab and modular. I have to say that those two are probably related, would be my assumption. What I've learned through talking to, I actually did quite a few months of talking to prefab and modular offsite construction. Anybody who's not a traditional stick-built is how I consider offsite modular prefabrication. And what they're telling me is that they're hitting roadblocks because they're not being brought in early enough. When you talk to them, they really need to integrate in very early in order to be able to do this and do this successfully, but they're willing to be partners in that process. And so it's not something, you can't think of it as, oh, I'm gonna hire a prefab or modular to do my construction instead of hiring the trades. That's not how you have to look at it. You've got to bring them in during the design process in order for that to happen. And they're willing to work with architects too. So the 6 factors that have impacted this decision for prefabrication or modular is the desire, and sorry, my slides got a little funky, I think, with the font switchover. The desire to control the building process. It can help with speed and with quality. There's tolerance for higher direct costs. So when things get a little wonky in the market, that there's a little bit of stability there. And then sometimes you have to think about the location of factories, but a lot of times the offsite construction is environmentally or for the health standpoint much more desirable for some individuals or for some builders. So those are the top 6 factors that you have to think about, and we could probably have a whole session on this, but we don't have time for that. And when we talk to consumers, so that's what architects are telling us. When we talk to consumers, they're saying that most of them say that they could be swayed to choose a prefabricated home. 3 out of 4 consumers are telling us this. Only a small percentage are like, heck no, I'm not doing that. And about half of homeowners would consider living in a 3D printed home. So you might say, like, that sounds crazy, but I don't know if you've read the news lately or not, but Lennar and Icon are actually printing homes right now in Texas. And there's a company called Mighty Buildings in California, and they just opened a home in Southern California, completely 3D printed home, and I think they're almost sold out, if not already, and they have a waiting list longer than they would ever be able to make homes for that community in particular. So it's on the horizon, it is out there. Oh.
It's very much a long-term goal of mine to get to the point where we can be either modular or 3D printed. The struggles we've had, for anybody who's looked into it, probably has some of the same stories. Capacity tends to be an issue with the modular and factories. Mm-hmm. Also, our home designs, just the way in talking to them, they'd have to cut them up. It really just wouldn't work. We'd sacrifice too much on the design of our houses to do it that way. 3D printing, right now the limitation is just width and depth of a footprint of a house, and right now all of our plans are too wide or too deep to do 3D printing, but over time that'll change. The technology will catch up, and I do believe it is the future of the industry.
And then lastly, we wanted to touch on energy efficiency. And in a lot of places, this is no longer a need, it's a requirement. Some states are starting to require it, but consumers are also catching on. We just got the results back from one of our surveys from consumers, and I don't have all the data in front of me, but most consumers are very aware of the fact that their home being energy efficiency can, number one, save them money over the long term, and they're starting to recognize this and desire it. It's going beyond appliances. It's great to have Energy Star, woohoo, that's awesome, but like what else is happening in my home that can help save me money? And as we talked to architects, they are also looking at building envelope solutions, mechanical systems, solar panels. These are the top ways to try to get to some sort of sustainable solution to help offset what's going on in the home. The building envelope being number one, so thinking about how the house is coming together, the moisture barriers, the airflow. And again, if we look at production architects and custom designers, both custom architects and production architects are looking at energy efficiency as one of their top decision makers. On the custom side, the difference in this is production architects, their clients are builders. Custom architects, their clients are consumers, and they're designing specifically for that individual consumer. So there's a little bit of difference potentially on price point and who can do that. And so even people that can afford to spend a ton of money on a home and hire their own architect, they're still saying, make my home more energy efficiency and save me money over the long term. And then sustainability and carbon, it's not a factor yet, but again, that survey result that we just got back last week, we were shocked when we looked at it. About 40% of consumers say that carbon and carbon neutral and what's going on in carbon and how they can offset their carbon is a factor in their day-to-day decision making. So it might not be that they fully connect the dots yet, but they're starting to get there in their mindset.
So about 2 years ago, we redesigned all of our HVAC systems to a compact design that's much more efficient. That's helped us out quite a bit on our HERS scores. We do have some franchises, since we operate in so many different parts of the country, that do offer net zero ready customizations to their buyers. And I think it all just boils down to what's a driving buying force in your market. It kind of varies, because we do a lot in the Midwest, and that's not as much of a priority as it would be to people that live out here or in California.
Fantastic. All right, we have about 5 minutes for questions. So just raise your hand, start talking. I think we're a small enough group that if you have questions, you can just stand up, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have. I think I can see everybody through the lights. Hi, yes.
Is there a particular target market that are interested in either the 3D homes, the modular homes, the prefab homes that you know of?
So thank you, Gigi. Really good question. What we're finding as we talk to consumers, and we probably still need to dig into this because there's a lot of details in this question, but high level, consumers do not care or even really know how their homes are built. Every time we talk to them, they care about the floor plan, they care about what the kitchen looks like, they care about if it meets their needs, and they care about the location. How it gets there, they just want it. They just want it. They want to be able to afford it. They want it to be where they need it to be, and they need it to meet their lifestyle. How it gets from a piece of dirt to their completed home, most of them are indifferent about it or completely unaware of that process.
Till it saves them money or gets them in their home faster.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. The one thing I will say that I've learned about 3D printing and or offsite construction is depending on if it's a true modular. So like think about dropping in kitchen pods, dropping in bathroom pods. If it's a panelized, like structural insulated panel or functional panel where you already have your wiring, your plumbing, everything connected, versus if it's just a off-site panelized wall system that you still have to run plumbing and electrical through. There's multiple different types of off-site construction. What I'm finding is that the structural insulated panels or the modular, the true modulars, they're getting inspected on site and factory, which means you get to skip the inspection on site, which helps speed things along. Different states play different games there. So I can speak from California just because I happen to live in that state and I can kind of dig into the details there. But once it gets, specifically for 3D printed, there's an example, once they get checked in the factory, you don't have to go through all of the on-site visits that you have to do with traditional stick-built.
In the last year, what would be the top one or two things that you've learned from your surveys that's been the most surprising or eye-opening to you and the team?
The past 1 to 2 years, I don't know if it's going to be surprising. It's the things, most of the time, the things that we learn in our surveys are the ones that people say, yeah, that makes sense, and I'm really glad we confirmed it. Like, easy to clean. And here's the thing, we don't even ask about easy to clean in a lot of our surveys. What we do is we say, why are you frustrated? What's the most frustrating thing about your kitchen? What's the most frustrating thing about your bathroom? What's the most frustrating thing about your home office? What's the most frustrating thing about your outdoor living space? And then we give them an opportunity after they select whatever the quantitative is to give us a qualitative answer. And we leave these open text box. And they go off about having to clean their house. And it shows up time and time and time again. And in survey after survey, I remember one woman, she was like, please stop suggesting that I do penny tile in my bathroom. Like, I'm not gonna clean penny tile with all that grout in my bathroom. Stop showing it to me, stop giving me, and I mean, I kid you not, she went on for like 3 paragraphs talking, like she went off about anything that had that amount of grout on it, right? And so easy to clean is probably the #1 no-brainer. The ability for people to, how do I say this? They recognize that energy efficiency and sustainability matter. #1 reason that it matters for them is because it saves them money, but they're okay getting the brownie points because they feel like they're saving the planet. But the difference between those two things is like this, right? It's like the #1 reason is I want to save money. And so I always go to the example of when Priuses first came on the market. And they had the giant window stickers that said, we'll save you $5,000 a year in gas, or whatever the number was. I don't know, I'm making it up. But that type of marketing really resonates with the consumers when they realize, like, yeah, I might pay the same for this home, but because it's so energy efficient, I'm going to save so much money over the time. Anything else? Any questions? Any questions? Seeing none? All right, we'll see you later. Thanks, everybody.